So welcome to the Witchy Wit podcast, episode 15, Grief.
Grief. As you hear that word, what are your feelings? Are you considering skipping this episode and moving on to something else?
And if you are, let's just suggest that you not, only because we discuss that tendency to push grief away from us.
Listen in and hear how we not only experience grief, but how we move with grief, and how as witches we stand in the shadow and transform it.
Stay tuned. Welcome to the Witchy Wit podcast, where we look at life through a witchy lens. I'm Kimberlyn.
I'm Leilani.
At Witchy Wit, we explore current events,
Ideas,
music and books,
and experiences in ways that recognize energy and life in everybody and everything.
We are both real witches,
And we bring two real perspectives through the lens of our different ages
races,
and backgrounds.
with a healthy skepticism for what we have been told is true. Our conversations are raw, candid, and vulnerable.
Join us as we cast a spell to uncover what we each know is true in our intuitive, witchy selves.
Before we talk about grief today, let's just kind of see what's going on with our lives at this moment. What's going on with you?
So I wanted to check in about actually something that I've been thinking about because of you.
Okay.
So one thing that I've noticed about you that I want more in my life is, I've noticed that in the moments, sometimes you'll pause and reflect before you speak and like back to me. And I noticed that you did that, and I thought it was interesting and neat. But then I started noticing in my own life how sometimes I just speak reactively instead of taking time to consider. And sometimes it doesn't matter, but I notice it. And then other times I'm like, wow, I wish I would have been more reflective. Even if just like maybe the person that I'm speaking with doesn't even notice, even if it's just a split second. But I don't know how to do it. Right now, I'm in I had the ignorance phase, and then I had the phase where I didn't know I wasn't doing it.
Yeah.
Then I had the phase where I noticed that it was a thing.
Mm-hmm.
Then I moved with you. Mm-hmm. Then I moved through that into the phase of just noticing that I don't do it and judging myself.
No. Okay.
So I have yet to move into the phase where I actually am able to catch myself in the moment. Right now I'm just in the phase where afterwards I'm like, well, that sucked. Like, it would have been nice if I would have like thought about
before I talked.
Yeah.
So may I respond to that?
I was hoping you would.
Okay. Well, actually, I tend to be a Hermione Granger.
Yes.
Okay. Good. Okay. So just in as much as throughout my school career, the professor, before they even finished the word, my hand would be up in the air, and I would formulate my answer. I formulated my answer as I spoke. Mm-hmm. I would judge what I was saying, and that would kind of condition what, the remainder of what I said, which is totally inefficient because I was wasting time instead of thinking. But I was an impulsive person, and so I would say, someone brought that to my attention when I was in graduate school. So
the look on your face as you say that. It's like our episode where we talked about getting feedback.
Yes, exactly.
So wonderful.
It was a professor who basically said, give somebody else a chance, and so it's funny that you say that the phases that you're going through, because once that happened, I was totally crushed because I wasn't accepting it as feedback. I was taking that as, I'm a horrible person. I'm not being fair and blah, 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 which might have been true. And that might have been the spirit in which you said it. But I didn't learn from it. I just knew that was the case. And it was kind of like I pendulumed in the opposite direction where I'm not going to speak at all and blah, 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 which is not, that's not fair either. So it took me a while to come to the stage where I became aware of the tendency. So it's funny that you say that. And then I basically fucked up for decades. So I'm hoping that
excellent.
I'm hoping you'll have
wow.
a less steep learning curve.
I'm inspired. Thanks, Kimberlyn.
Anytime, my dear. But the beauty of it is that it sounds like you're cycling through this much faster than I did. So I don't think it will take you decades. And then the next step for me was to, like you say, I missed that opportunity. Mm-hmm. And then you get the opportunity to stop. And then you have to like really actually think instead of doing what my go-to was, which is to hear myself verbalize it. And so I had to run it through my head. And then I was always afraid the conversation is going to go ahead without me, and I'm not going to be brilliant and share all this stuff. And then the next stage for me was and that's when I learned to listen. Ooh. Is because I stopped trying to I don't know, monopolize the conversation or direct the conversation. I'm not sure what it is. So anyway, I think you're so much further along than I was till maybe like 2 years ago. So
I have a question if you're willing to answer possibly. So I'm just the blessing and the curse is that I am a fast processor. I process fast. Like there's a reason why I can like create poetry like on the spot and like sing rhyming songs. Like I just.
So you could do like the Puro slams and
yes, yeah. Like I just like that's one way. And like I'm my puns. Like I like to pun, you are so, and I can just come up with them so fast. And that's a function of the way that I process so quick. The downside is that I can process so quickly that I'm just like bam, and I didn't really take time to think about it before I created the response. Are you a fast processor or are you just a genius? Because I think you're really smart.
No, well, thank you. But I'm not actually. I am not a fast processor. And that's part of the problem was that I would still be processing while I was talking. But instead of waiting until I had something valid to say, I would start talking and then find the validity, which was a sheer waste of a lot of people's time.
But it makes you probably good at writing.
That makes me very good at writing.
Very verbose.
Very and the beauty of writing is you can always go back and edit. You can't in conversation, right?
Ugh, so preach that.
Yeah. So and as I've gotten older, I think I want to say that it's not that I've become a slower processor, but I've just waited more and got more from the other person, so that when I did say something, it could be crafted. Okay. That's the word I'm looking for. So I think I craft a little bit more sometimes, not in our podcast, but sometimes. So I'm let's say I'm a mid-level processor, I'm a medium processor or whatever. Yeah. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. Thanks for listening.
Sure. Well, I listened and then I talked, which kind of tells you something, right? So
I did ask for your opinion.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that
because I've seen even in our recordings, we'll be talking and you'll say, and you take a breath, and then you.
Oh really?
Oh yeah.
Oh my gosh! Now I have to become aware of it.
Oh my gosh! It's wonderful.
Oh my gosh! Yay! Thank you. Thank you.
I figured you knew what I was talking about.
I could die now. Oh my gosh!
You've reached nirvana. Done.
I'm getting there. It's like, whoa, okay, check that one off.
Oh my goodness.
Oh my gosh.
I can't believe that I'm so grateful that I get to reflect that checkpoint back to you.
Thank you. I had no idea. Thank you.
Isn't it interesting that you didn't even realize that I'm getting a little emotional. We're not even to grief yet, but what you were doing that you didn't even realize was inspiring me.
I think that we do that. Wow. I think people do that so much and don't realize how much influence they can have on other people. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
How are you switching the roles here? How are you doing? What are you thinking about outside of Witchy?
So a friend and I have been catching up on the Hulu television series, The Handmaid's Tale. And I'd read the book back in the 80s.
Oh, really?
Yeah. When it came out. Yeah.
It came out in the 80s?
Yeah. I feel like, it's like, I feel so happy because I'm a teacher by nature. And so it's like, yeah, I can share all this stuff. Yay!
I like being shared too.
Yeah. Maybe it was I'm pretty sure it was the 80s because Anyway, so I'd read the book and then there was a movie that came out with one of the Richardson actresses, maybe Natasha, in the 90s. Or maybe, it's about then. And then I heard about this Hulu series. Oh my gosh. So we started watching. I think we've only seen 3 episodes. And I'd read the book, and then I reread the book about a year ago for some reason. And it has a great deal of impact. But this the movie was fascinating too, but this television show is amazing. It's so I feel so drawn into the drama. I mean, my heart was racing. There were times where I was almost crying myself. And one of the things that the gal I was watching this with mentioned is the music. And I teach an intro to film music class, so I know how powerful it can be. But they really did a phenomenal job. I have to look up and see who the music producers are, because the narrative is compelling. The acting is incredible, and then the music is like the triple whammy. And so I am just I can say I know. Well, they changed a few things for the television show. They did expand it a little bit because I think it's in the 2nd season now. But the thing that impressed me so much was how, even though I knew what was going to happen, I'm still emotionally compelled to be a part of this. So it's really, really powerful. I highly recommend it to people. And now she has a sequel out after 40 years or whatever.
Really?
Yeah, it came out 2 years ago, last year or 2 years ago. The Testaments.
Good for her.
So yeah, I love her, Margaret Atwood. I love her. Anyway, so she I'm just saying that it's an incredible. At least the first few episodes are incredible, and I highly recommend it. And it was really compelling experience.
Wow. It seems like I don't know anyone who's read it or watched it that hasn't been incredibly moved by it.
So other people have said that to you?
I've heard.
Okay.
I've heard a lot. Well, because I feel like we were living in it, kind of.
Well, that's the thing. When I read this in the 80s, it was kind of like, oh, this can't happen here. This can't happen. That kind of stuff. And then, so one scene that my friend and I were sitting there, like our jaws dropped, was that they just mentioned it in passing. They didn't say it, but they said when crowds came in and slaughtered the Congress.
No.
Yeah.
Wow.
So all of these things that we said couldn't happen here, now we know it could happen here. It could happen. It could happen anywhere. And it just means that we have to be very vigilant. And even when it's not cool, even when people think we're being hypersensitive or edgy or whatever, that we have to be protective of our rights. So anyway, so it's really it's a chilling experience, but I mean really, really good television show, but kind of chilling because of the past few years.
Wow. Well, do you want to move on to a lighter subject and talk about grief?
Let's do it. Okay, let's.
We wanted to spend our time together today kind of talking about the grief process and our personal experiences with grief. One of the reasons why I brought up this subject as something that you and I might talk about is because we've known each other long enough. Like, how long have we known each other?
We've known each other for at least 15 years.
Gosh.
I know.
I don't think, I just shared how I think quickly. I don't think quickly with numbers. So it would take me a while to figure that out. But we've known each other long enough that my impression of our relationship is that we've seen the ups and the downs. We've seen really beautiful things, and we've seen really hard things for each of us. And so as a friend of yours, I feel like I've witnessed you experience grief. And in my experience of my own experience, I know you have deeply witnessed and even been a part of healing the grief that I've had. So that's kind of why I wanted to bring it up.
And one of the things that I find interesting is that even when we said we weren't going to talk about a definition, but one of the things about grief is that this idea of it's a response to loss. And even when something good happens, by definition, you're losing the bad, right?
Right.
So I will put, for example, I was politically happy for the past couple of months because of elections and things like that. And on a certain level, I'm kind of grieving because I feel as if there were a number of things that were raised that could have been addressed and have not been addressed. And so I'm kind of I guess I'm grieving the loss of those opportunities.
That makes a lot of sense. I think another reason why I wanted to talk about it was this cultural loss that we're all experiencing together. Things all the way down from like a loss of feeling safe, all the way up to like a loss of loved ones who have died in the pandemic, or a loss of our ability to experience certain things. And I feel like the macrocosm is similar to the microcosm in that as people, we want to move through the grief as fast as possible, or maybe not even, maybe sidestep it altogether because it sucks and it's so hard.
It's painful.
But when we don't do that, then we end up missing this stage of healing, and then we're just carrying this trauma along with us. That's like a backpack.
Yes, that's a very good point.
And I feel like we've done that as a culture before. I am not an expert, but I don't feel like we grieved and we worked through September 11th as a culture.
No. I agree. I
think we went from like shocked to angry, and then to moved on. Well,
and celebrating the victors and things like that, and because I agree. I think Americans as a culture, we tend to be rah-rah, rough and ready individualists, and we're always going to be positive. Like I remember, this is just just an aside. A friend of mine, an Italian, said that I guess about 30 years ago, Europe was kind of aghast at the fact that Americans would just tell people to have a good day. It's like, don't tell me what kind of day, that kind of have a good day and the smile, and many people were kind of suspicious because they said, why are Americans always smiling? So I think as a culture, we tend to value optimism. And so a part of that is saying, yes, we've gotten through this, and we're we're pushing on, and that sort of thing. And I mean, that's really what's valued when you look at our literature.
The rugged individualism, pulling ourselves up by the bootstraps.
Very much, very much. And also then we miss that opportunity to grieve. So I thought about this a few years ago when my mom died, and I remember a friend telling me, people are going to tell you they're not going to say cheer up, but they're going to try to make you cheer up. And she said, you have to be really, really protective of your grief and allow yourself to grieve. And she didn't say it this articulately. She wasn't that type of person. This was a friend of my mother, so she was my mother's generation. But she said, she said, it's going to take as long as it takes. And that was, I so held on to that when we got to the summer, and people just kind of, I was cleaning out her house, and that was traumatic. And people just said, oh, well, we'll come and help you do stuff. And they kept trying to cheer me up. It's like, no, just let me cry.
Yeah.
Or let me just be sad. Not necessarily cry, but let me just look at something of hers and be sad.
Why do you think that people try to cheer you up? Because that's my experience too. Whenever I'm grieving, is that people want to distract you or cheer you up. Like, why do you think that is?
I don't know, but I can tell you when I am tempted to do the same thing. One is I honestly think it will help them. I honestly think I can make them not feel sad, right? I think that would probably be a part of it for a lot of people. And then the other is just, I'm so damn uncomfortable. It's like, I don't know what to do. I can't help them. I can I can try to make them feel better, but I can't actually make them feel better.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm helpless. And so I just like start pulling out like stupid asinine things just to kind of get through that moment. If that makes any sort of sense.
It makes total sense. That's my experience too.
Yeah. And I would and having said that, there are friends of mine who just said, just come over here and just lay here and I'll, let me hug you.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I needed, was to just, cry, ugly cry.
Yes.
Ugly cry. They let me ugly cry and just be sad and not have to put on a face and, put on a good face or, yeah.
I think the people that have helped me sit in my grief, and then because they allowed me to sit still in it, and therefore then I could move through it. Mm-hmm. The people that did that, that were the most impactful on me, were the ones who agreed to just sit with me and be with me. And then the ones who acknowledged the grief. Because I think a lot of people, rightly so, think, well, I don't really want to bring it up. I don't want to make her sad again.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. Yes.
And so then I just feel like we're all walking around pretending like I'm not experiencing this horrible trauma, which then just makes me feel even more alone with whatever it is.
I never thought about that, but that makes so much sense.
So even just having the acknowledgement of like, I just want you to know I'm thinking about you. You don't even have to bring up the subject. Mm-hmm. Like, we know what we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Oh, you're thinking about the email I sent? No, like, of course. Like, I know exactly what you're talking about. But acknowledging it was really helpful for me, and sitting with me in it.
I know for a fact that people who have suffered grief or suffered loss and grieved tend to understand it because they've been through it. Mm-hmm. Have you had the experience where someone, maybe a young person, I don't know if young people experience loss too, but someone who may not necessarily have gone through what you're going through, have you had that had the experience where they could be helpful to you in those situations?
I think yes, and I think it's not like we experience the same type of grief, or even that, but just the people that knew to do those things, regardless of whether or not they experience it, because I think it's a property of empathy.
Oh, right. Yeah, of course.
Right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm,
and not a property of lived experience.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's easier if you've, like, if I've lost my mother and you lose yours, right. I can say I've been through that, but I still haven't been through yours because we have totally different mothers and we're totally different people, right? But I know what I went through, and so on a certain level I can sympathize, if not empathize, right? But for people who haven't, they often are either intuitive or they just have that sense of how to be there for someone. Yeah, that makes sense.
Like whenever, so we had already been to Portland together. And so I remember I loved how you would talk to your mom on the phone.
Yes.
Like those were some of my favorite moments, listening to you talk to her as we were getting on, and then you tell her that you had to go. And I was going through a divorce, like I had just started the divorce process at that time, which is my major grief experience so far in my life, where I was taught about grief. But when your mom passed, I was still deeply processing the divorce, and I know that I would respond differently to you in that situation now, having been through that process on my own in grief, than I did then.
Yeah. No, I think it makes a difference I think it's easier. I think it's easier to understand. And so much of it is about understand. Not even having lived it yourself, but being able to let that person be, like let them grieve, right? We're recording this a couple of days after Queen Elizabeth II, her husband, the only Queen Elizabeth we have, right? But
which Queen Elizabeth? There's so many.
But Queen Elizabeth, just her husband, Prince Philip, died. She said this was years ago. She said this, but I just think it's so appropriate as we're talking about grief, that she's really suffering it right now. And she said that grief, you only have grief when you've loved. that grief, you can only grieve a loss of something that you've loved, and that when you love, there's going to be grief, right? And I think a part of that, for so many people, when you'd ask about being able to empathize and to help people who are grieving, is that when you've had a loss, I'm kind of like scared. And what I mean by that is, like, it's kind of like when someone has cancer, you want to find out, like, what have they been eating, or that kind of stuff, so that you don't get it.
Right, right, yeah.
And so when you've suffered a loss, it's like, I want to know that it won't happen to me. And so part of it could be, people might think it's contagious, and they distance themselves so that they don't have to go through it even with you, right? But I think some of the awkwardness is just, I would not want to feel that pain, and even watching you feel that pain, even watching it secondhand is still not comfortable.
I know when I went, I also just want to caveat real quick that my divorce itself is not what caused me the grief, or where I find grief. It's like all the, like, so I don't even like saying,
I'm snapping while she said that.
I don't even like saying, like, grieving my divorce, because I've shared before that I feel like authenticity, sobriety, but it's a loss of many things that were under this umbrella of this action that I took. But I found that I've had a number of very close friends go through that transformative process since that I went through it, and I have found myself being incredibly emotional with them, and then also, like, afterwards processing. But I've also found, as I sit with them in their grief, and then it brings things back up for me, I process my grief more deeply.
And probably better?
Yes. Yeah. Because I'm not drowning in,
right.
I'm not flailing and drowning and just trying to keep my friggin' life together, But now I can sit and I can journal in complete sentences about my thoughts, because I'm not just like, going crazy.
Yeah, with your pen ripping through the page. Right. So it's much more therapeutic when it comes up now, because you have some tools and et cetera, and distance. Distance probably more than anything else. Yeah, you mentioned your divorce, and for me, I put down, when we were thinking about this, a loss that I suffered was my marriage, and it wasn't actually that the marriage, because this sounds kind of flip, but really my divorce was probably the best part of my marriage, but my idea of what my marriage could have been. And I finally had to give that up, and because I think that's what kept me in there the longest. I didn't want to admit, all of these things. So for me, the grief was that I will never, I could have it with another person, right? But I will never have what I wanted to have with this person, and the loss was for me giving up that possibility, and that was grievous to me. That was painful, really painful.
I really am moved by the way you said that, because it's not about whether or not what you did was better for you, or whether or not he was a turd of a human. Like, it's not about that, because what the grief is tied to is about the loss of what could have been.
That's exactly right. Yeah. And that's, and to be honest, we were toxic. He was the horrible person and I wasn't, we were just toxic together. So I just want to say that, just in case he's listening. But I had to finally accept, and that was painful. For a number of reasons that was painful. But the idea of losing something, or, giving up something, sometimes we voluntarily give it up, but it's still painful. It's still a loss. I left the marriage willingly, and it was still incredibly painful.
I had an interesting experience that I couldn't name it at the time, but I was in my late 20s, and I decided to get the copper IUD.
Oh yeah.
For a lot of reasons, but I'm really happy with my choice, just so everybody knows. I'm almost 10 years later. I'm really,
Yeah.
Strongly recommended.
Okay.
If it's right for you. Mm-hmm. But I remember I was married at the time, and I was like, I do not want to have children. Mm-hmm. Now I know I really didn't want to have children with that person. So I'm really grateful that I at least knew that then, that was not the partner for me to have children with if I decided I wanted children. But I remember going and getting the IUD put in by my OBGYN. And then I came home, and I remember I was just incredibly sad. And I remember sitting on the couch, and I had like a hot pack because like I was cramping some. And I was just sitting there, and I was just really emotional, and I had no idea why. I was like, why am I, like, nothing went wrong, everything is fine. Why am I so upset? And it took me a really long time. I'm like, years for me to understand. Like, this was something that I wanted, yes, and I was grieving. But nobody, and this is why I get pissed about this. Like, why did nobody tell me? Like, why, like, where is the support? And why aren't we talking about this?
Yes.
Why are we not talking about this? Because nothing was wrong, but like, where was the support of, like, how do people not talk about this?
How is it that maybe your gynecologist didn't say, often when this happens, women suffer this, or they feel this, like, well, I can tell you why. Because it's a woman thing, and no one thinks about it.
Right.
It's not let me just let that go. But
yeah. And it just seems like,
because it is a loss. You're losing the chance to have kids. I mean, you're volunteering to do that, right? But still,
and that's like, it's like this complicated thing for me to hold, because it's like, this is my choice. This is what I'm choosing, at that time, and like I'm giving up on this. I'm saying no. When I say yes to something, anytime we say yes, we're saying no to something else, right?
Yes, exactly.
And so, like, even though I'm choosing this yes, like, can we take a hot second and allow me and or women in general, like, I feel like this is like a shared experience, women in general, a chance to both hold the yes and the no, and to celebrate the yes and to grieve the no.
Exactly.
Because instead, I'm just sitting there on the couch wondering why I'm sad.
What's wrong with me?
Right? Yeah. Instead of like, oh, like, there's this thing I'm saying no to, and that hurts and is sad.
But again, that's not our culture. Our culture is to, okay, you're striking a blow for independence. You're not being tied down by children and blah, blah, blah. So yes, yes.
Right.
And like you say, there's a no, and we are kind of conditioned to face the sun, so that, and we never see the shadow, right?
Oof.
So,
oof.
Yeah, I mean, that's essentially it.
And I don't feel like it serves anyone, because on the opposite side of that, when women choose to have children, like, let's grieve the loss of the things that, when they say yes to children, then they're saying no to maybe other things, like their love to travel, like maybe they wanted to teach in Japan. I don't know, but we aren't serving anyone by not holding space for this grief.
Holding the paradox.
Yes.
We're trained to, like, only see the positive. Look on the bright side. So yeah.
One of the other things that you just said, I wonder if, as witches, we're able, we make room for ourselves to stand in both.
Well, yes, I agree. Because funny you should say. Well, because and this may not be the case with all of the traditions, but I know among our circle, we play with the shadow, and we recognize that the shadow is a part of our lives, and so we try to approach it in a very celebratory way. Those of us who choose to approach it
I'm just laughing. We're like, it's summer solstice, let's talk about shadow. And then we're always like, oh, we're moving into the dark time of the year, so we can start singing dark time of the year chants. We've been singing them all year long. But now we feel like it's more appropriate.
Yeah, I know. It's like, woo! So yeah, and so I think, and it maybe not just witches, but people who really are grounded in maybe the cycles of the year, are able to hold that paradox, right? We're moving into the summer. That means we're leaving behind the spring. We're moving into the fall. It's easy to say, oh, the leaves are falling. We're moving into the winter and it's getting colder and things are dying, etc. But even moving into the spring, we're leaving behind the kind of the woominess of the winter. And, we're always, as we move, we're leaving something behind, right? And often we're sick of what we're leaving behind. So it might be more natural, but there is that element. There is loss constantly in our lives, and we don't see it.
Do you feel like your witchy practices have helped you with your grief?
Honestly, yes. But even before that, what helped me the most, not with my grief, but understanding that grief is going to be a part of my life, is having pets.
Oh.
Having animals, because the majority of them, unless you have a parrot, I've heard, those babies outlive you.
Or a tortoise.
Or tortoise.
Those tortoises that live like for 5 months. I don't know how it is, right?
Like you have to leave it in your will to somebody. But like dogs and cats, and people often don't think about that when they get that cute little puppy, but when you bring that wonderful, vibrant life into your home, the odds are that you are going to watch it go. And it's going to happen again and again and again, unless you decide you're not going to have pets, right? And so I think my first dog, when I was a kid, I remember telling my mom, I'm really sad that Corky's gone. And she said, oh, honey, just be sad. Which was remarkably insightful of my mom, because she's like, I don't want to hear it. but or be sad in your room or something. But no, I'm making that up. But she just said, yeah, be sad. And that was, and I think so much of it is having permission. Someone just giving me permission to be sad was incredibly powerful, as opposed to trying to talk me out of or jolly me out, or here's a puppy, here's a new puppy.
Oh no.
That's the last thing you want, right? So having animals, I suspect people who are on farms, they live the paradox, right?
They live, yeah,
and eat it.
They live it, they eat it, they see it.
Yeah. So that I think was my first taste of it. But I think my witchiness, my witchy practices have helped me to process better. And like embrace the paradox and think about it in a way, like you said, you're able to journal it because you had a little bit of distance. It allows me to kind of put it in a capsule and play with it, and then take it back and put it inside of myself and then feel it, right? So that has been super helpful. What about with you? What has helped you?
Well, so I was hoping you would ask, or we would talk about this, because however much you're comfortable with sharing it, but you and some other women came over and did a ritual,
right, with
myself and another sister of ours who was experiencing something similar. I don't remember a lot of it.
Wow.
I know.
Yeah.
I have images and I remember certain things, but what I do remember is weeping a lot. And I remember like breaking an object, and like feeling a spiritual happening with that motion and burying it and just feel, and like knowing that was significant. Like, and now I look back and I'm like, well, burying that's very like primitive and magical and meaningful. But in the moment, just like knowing like this is a thing, like this is important. And then the other thing that really made an impact on me was just having women witness and like choosing to be with me. Like, I'm getting emotional, like thinking about it, like in that moment when I was at my ugliest and my least controlled and my least pretty and in my flailing and in my like, I couldn't even tell you like which way was up, like I am just like at my least charismatic. In that moment, these people came together, and they were not only with me, but they were like with me.
Yeah. No, I remember that that night. It was very powerful. Do you remember? You said you remember crying. Do you remember crying in the rain and howling to the skies in the rain? Oh, it was like downpour.
I remember
while you were like digging in the mud with your bare hands.
Okay,
maybe not.
I remember it rained. And that was not planned.
Yeah.
But I remember feeling like the earth was mourning with me. Like the earth was cleansing and releasing with me. And I really feel like that was on purpose.
It was very primal.
When you get witches together like that, like shit rains, right? I don't remember digging with my bare hands. I do remember digging, but now that I think about it, what else would I have dug with? And
I think there was a shovel or a spade or something there, but I don't know if you used that too. But I just remember the bare hands.
And then I do remember crying. I don't remember howling.
Mm-hmm. You might have been weeping. Maybe that's different from howling.
Well, I don't remember that. But
okay,
but it makes total sense.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And just a moment of transparency. In this moment, I'm feeling I don't have any problems being naked in front of we've been to lots of clothing optional events.
Yes.
But the term that people use is like feeling naked.
Yeah.
Like I do feel like naked in this moment, hearing you say that. But I also feel really witnessed.
Okay. Because I was going to say, if you feel really naked, we can edit this out.
No.
Okay. All right. Good. It was incredible being able to be there for someone at the moment. So often when people are grieving, you see them, like you say, when they've prettied up, right? They put the tissues away for your little visit, and they're bucking it up, and you bring them your casserole, or your in New Jersey it's baked ziti. You bring them your ziti, I'm gonna bring you a pan of ziti. And
really?
I never brought you a pan of ziti. Oh, okay. Well,
no.
Okay.
You brought me a ritual instead.
Okay.
So
all right.
It's okay. I can get carved somewhere else.
Okay. All right. Yeah. But normally when someone's visiting you, when you're going through some sort of thing like that, you put on some clothes and kind of like maybe sop up the tears for a moment or so. But what was powerful for me was you allowed us to see something that we often don't see when someone is grieving. And I just felt I felt honored, first of all, but I just felt as if I was being kind of blessed by being able to watch someone go through this and being able to be there for them, being able to witness for you. It's pretty powerful.
Wow.
Yeah, really powerful.
Did you have any experiences when you were in that ritual with me? Did you have anything come up for you as someone who had been through something similar but different? But
Yeah. So one of the things that I saw, and it kind of made me, I don't want to say happy, but I was happy to see it, was that sometimes when we make these decisions, we second guess and we doubt, and maybe I should give him another chance or that kind of thing. And you were not. You were like, done. And so for me, what really kind of struck me was that I saw it was like a door closed or window closed or whatever, that you were turning a corner and going into a new phase. And so we often don't get a chance to see that with somebody else. We see the ceremony, like we'll have a rite of passage for you and all that kind of stuff. But this was like, I saw parts of you made the decision, but I saw you like cementing the decision in on a certain level, and that resonated for me because I wanted you to be able to go through, like it's hard enough going through as it is, but it's got to be incredibly painful to go through if you're not sure you want to go through it. And so it was I was very happy to see that you were grieving, but you weren't grieving your decision, you were grieving whatever else, because that was the same thing for me, was that it's like done. So that I think that was the biggest thing, was that I was hoping that would be the case for you, and I kind of got that impression.
It's interesting. We've spent so much time together, but I don't know that we've ever actually talked about that ritual ever.
I don't think so either. Well, probably because I didn't want to bring it up. I didn't want to make you sad. And it was intensely private, right?
It was super
We
private.
were witnessing that, but we were really witnessing, individual pain.
Yeah.
And so, how, it doesn't just come up at a cocktail party.
Right, that's true.
That time when you were digging in the dirt, howling to the moon, that it doesn't. So, but it comes up on the podcast, apparently.
Right, apparently. We haven't really talked about it. Let's talk about it. So it can be stored indefinitely and talked about and listened to at people's leisure.
Well, if our pain can help one other person.
Right.
But yeah. You're right. We haven't. But it was an incredibly powerful night for me. So I don't know why.
I don't know why either. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I do know that I think about it a lot.
Mm-hmm. Oh, see, I didn't realize that. Okay.
I do think about it a lot. And I think that had I not been witnessed by in that way, I don't think that I would have moved with grief and then moved through the grief in the way that I did.
Yeah.
Or that I am still. Mm-hmm. But that was probably the most helpful and important thing that happened.
Really?
I think so.
Wow, that's so good
in the
to hear.
whole process. Was just being witnessed in that way and held in that way.
And not just by us, but by the elements.
By the elements.
But yeah.
By my tree.
Yeah.
I still, I know exactly where I buried that, and I still will walk around it, and I know that it's there, and I talk with it, or I talk to it, at it. I'm not interested in listening to it, but I will talk at it.
Yeah.
And I talk to my tree about thank you for you're still holding that.
Wow.
Just keep that down there.
That's amazing. That's amazing. That's very healthy.
And sometimes when I have friends over in the backyard and we have a fire pit and people are sitting around it, I'll actually have moments where I'm like, oh, they're sitting on that. They have no idea. Let's just keep that.
You get it like a dog go by and lift his leg around.
Right. I'm like, that's good.
Wow. So let's kind of talk about this. I think back to the times when I've been grieving, and what are some of the things that you do to kind of help yourself when you're grieving? I'll start since I've been thinking about it. So one of the things that I used to do, and I haven't done this I haven't really. I've been more angry than grieving the past few years, but one of the things that I used to do when I was really, really sad, there's two things. One was when I was sad or depressed, I tended to sleep a lot, but that was just, I think it was kind of sadness moving into depression, which is basically avoidance. And so sleeping allowed me to not think about it. I was probably processing maybe in my dreams or whatever, but I was not allowing myself to consciously process. But when I did, one of the things that was so helpful for me, I would just go into a room, turn off all the lights, kind of get under a blanket and just play the darkest music. I mean, some of it would be classical, like the do, that kind of stuff. And then some of it is just really dark or sad pop music, any type of music, but it would have to be really, really sad. It would have to be the music that you would almost cry on at a disco, right? And
did you just say at a disco?
Well, okay. At a rave, how's that?
When things open back up again, I'm gonna text you and be like, "Hey, Kimberlyn, do you want to go out with me to the disco?"
Fuck yeah! Oh God, I'm so old. Okay. But I'm not too old to go out dancing at a rave.
That's so true. Just so everybody knows, we go out clubbing together. Pre-pandemic, we would.
Okay. Well,
anyways, let's keep talking about what you were saying was really valuable.
Okay.
Okay.
So the music would have to be really super, super sad, because if it wasn't, I would kind of try to talk myself out of it. So I needed something that was going to keep me there. And I mean, I don't know why I have this image of pouring water on myself. I think I was just trying to cry so much that in my head I was just picturing myself just being sopping wet, and just letting this music just play and play and play and play and play, and it would go from one sad song to another sad song. And that really helped. Music always helps me. And I think because it wouldn't let me talk myself out of, okay, let's buck up and let's, let's move through this. It would just kind of keep me in that.
Would you like cry when you were walking?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. Okay. I mean, sometimes I didn't. Sometimes I would just lay there. But I felt, I would allow myself to feel. And however that, sometimes it made me cry. But it I wouldn't say it forced me, but it gave me permission to feel. And that is not my go-to. My go-to is to kind of ignore it. So that was very helpful for me.
Wow. Wow. So I move with grief physically by moving. So, which is great when I'm by myself. But like if I do partner dance, and I've had moments where I'm experiencing and moving with my grief, and the person that I'm dancing with is like, what the hell is going on? And that's not good.
Wow, no. Well, it's good on it's paradox, right? It's good on one level and maybe not so much on the other.
So like if I have to be careful, because the moment I start moving my body is the moment that I'm inviting feeling and processing.
Wow, good.
So if I'm not aware of that, and then I go like to a dance and I'm like partner dancing, like that's just something I have to navigate, right?
Wow.
But when I go to the disco,
fuck you.
But there have been a lot of times whenever I've gone to the club that you and I love to go to, and actually my roommate, who happened to be going through a divorce at a similar time with me, like we would both go and we would be out there on the dance floor with hundreds of our closest friends, and there's like lights and smoke and as I say, the holy sacred thud thud, and we would just both be weeping, having our own private rituals. And on the dance floor.
And at the bottom, it's like, okay.
Well, people are just like, whatever. There is way weirder stuff going on than like me standing in a corner dancing to Tiesto and crying.
Yes, exactly.
There's way weirder stuff and more shitty stuff.
Did you know that growing up, when did you figure out that was a good way for you to handle your feelings?
I figured it out as an adult.
Okay.
And I figured it out because it was happening, and I was like, I don't know why this is happening, but this works. And
okay.
And then it wasn't until I started to figure it out as a young adult. But then it wasn't until I joined our group and I began understanding ritual technology that I then was like, oh, this explains why that's happening.
Right.
I didn't understand.
Yeah. Oh, amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. But you were kind of doing it.
I was already doing it. I just didn't know why I was doing it. Which also explains like why I would like to go and not drink. Because I wanted to be able, everyone else was drinking, but I was processing.
Yeah. Wow, that's amazing. Well, I'll tell you why I don't drink at clubs. First of all, I'm cheap. I don't like to spend the money because you drink half of it and you put it down and then you can't tell which cup is yours. And I'm not going to just drink anybody's cup, right? And if you leave it, you never know what somebody might put.
It's true.
So,
it's true.
So there is that. And she was going to, dance with it. That's why I love the clubs now that you can get a bottle of water because then you can carry the bottle and you can still dance with the bottle. You won't splash anybody. And it's better for you anyway. It's so much more helpful. Yeah, but we digress. Sorry.
I think the only thing that I really want to add to what we've said, which just like our intro says, was raw, candid, and vulnerable.
Yes, indeed.
Is as I think it's because I'm an English teacher, but I love children's books. And one of the reasons why I love children's books is because they are not as verbose as adult books, but they still hold the same content, just in a way that is presented in a way that I think is simpler, but just as complex. So if anyone is looking for a book to read that's wonderful, it's called The Rabbit Listened by Corey Duerfeld. And that book, I read a lot. I love reading, and I read a lot of books, and I am reading a lot of books around grief and like the dark night of the soul and like other things about grieving and healing and trauma. And all of that aside, The Rabbit Listened was is still my number one pick.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. Is it a picture book?
It's a children's book for young children, but it has big pictures and then little words. But it's the book that I actually have multiple copies because I keep it to give to people when they go through loss. Adults.
I was going to say, I'd love to borrow it. Just I won't keep it because I want you to be able to have it so you can give to someone. But I'd love to read it.
I think it's a really wonderful book.
Oh, wonderful! Get it? Yeah, excellent. The Rabbit Listened.
The Rabbit Listened.
Okay, thank you. So the poem that we're going to read today is called "Spell for the End of Grief" by Amie Whittemore, and she is an interesting person. She's the Poet Laureate of Murfreesboro, Tennessee, and she's been partnering with Southern Word to offer a series of poetry workshops and open mics for LGBTQ plus teens in various places in Tennessee. And so this is her poem. Spell for the End of Grief by Amie Whittemore. No incantations, no rosemary and status, no keening women in grim dresses.
No cauldrons, no candles, no hickory wands, no honey and chocolate, no sticky buns.
No peonies and carnations, no handkerchiefs, no dark and lusty liaisons.
Only you and me to see it out. Sweet self, let me wash your toes.
Brush your hair, let me rock you gently. Together we'll change the sheets.
And I'll pull you to me, little spoon. You be the marrow, I'll be the bone. We hope you've enjoyed the magic that has unfolded here at Witchy Wit.
Follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Witchy Wit Podcast.
Email us at witchywit123@gmail.com. Rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Get exclusive content and support us on Patreon.
Stay witchy, y'all!